Today, I'm going to be telling you two true crime stories linked by a single theme. Both of these cases have final photos associated with them that seem innocent at first glance, but which have incredibly haunting context behind them. As always, my name is Nigel, I run this channel with my good friend Luke, and welcome back to Crime Zone. A reminder, if you do find today's video interesting and informative, be sure to like and subscribe for more true crime stories told with a mysterious and suspenseful vibe. With that out of the way, let's dive in. On June 29th, 2023, a 14-year-old boy named Joaquín Sperani left his home in the city of La Boulage, Argentina. The footage you're seeing on screen right now was taken from a home security camera just a few houses down from where Joaquín lived with his family. It shows the teen on his bicycle as he rides off in the direction of his high school. The school was only about 6 blocks away, and it was a journey that Joaquín had made dozens, if not hundreds of times before. But what neither he nor anyone else knew was that this time was special. You see, this video had captured the last trip that he would ever make to school. At around 8 p.m. that same evening, Joaquín's mother, Mariela, and his father, Martín, were getting ready to sit down for dinner. The couple's 4 other children were already there, and everyone was patiently waiting, but Joaquín still hadn't arrived home. This was despite the fact that his classes were supposed to have let out about an hour and a half ago. So, the way that a lot of schools in Argentina supposedly work is that the day is split into 2 sessions, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, with a pretty sizable gap in between. In some places, students only attend one of the 2 sessions per day, but in others, they go to both and the subjects are just split between the 2 halves. It's unclear exactly how Joaquín's school worked, but that day, he was definitely supposed to be in classes in the afternoon, and those classes were scheduled to end around 6:30 p.m. Now, initially, no one was overly concerned about Joaquín. His mother knew that he would often go to his aunt's place after school because she also lived nearby, and Joaquín was very close with his cousins. In fact, the whole extended family was very tight-knit. Still, everyone at the house was getting hungry, so Mariela asked Martín to call her sister to tell Joaquín to kind of get a move on and come home so that they could eat. This is when things started to get scary, though. When Martín made that phone call, his sister-in-law told him that not only was Joaquín not there, neither she nor his cousins had seen him at all that day. Upon contacting Joaquín's school, Mariela and Martín got even more alarming news. Officials there said that their son had been marked as absent from his classes that afternoon. This was particularly upsetting for Mariela because she had actually called the school that day to tell them that Joaquín left the house a few minutes late. So when she heard this, Mariela was like, "What do you mean he didn't go to class? I specifically called to tell you he would be there. Didn't anyone notice or think that was weird?" What was worse, over the next few hours, Mariela and Martín received mixed reports as they and school staff started reaching out to other members of faculty as well as Joaquín's classmates. At least one teacher thought they remembered saying hi to him as they headed into the building that afternoon. But students said the complete opposite. They couldn't recall seeing him at all. This included Joaquín's best friend, Leandro. When Mariela called and spoke to him over the phone that night, he was adamant that he hadn't seen Joaquín that day. This was when she and Martín decided to call the police. Unfortunately, from the sounds of it, authorities didn't take the situation all that seriously when Joaquín was first reported missing. However, that began to change when an unsettling discovery was made. It's not clear who first noticed this, but Joaquín's bicycle was locked in the rack outside of his school. In other words, he definitely had made it there that day. The question now was, what had happened to him after that? Mariela and Martín were worried that Joaquín had somehow been kidnapped from the school's campus. They began making desperate posts on social media, trying to get the word out about their son's disappearance, as well as organizing searches of the local area. They were helped primarily by members of the community. Neighbors and other residents really stepped up to try and do whatever they could to help the terrified family. As this was going on, police were working more in the background and attempting to retrace Joaquín's steps. They did this mostly through recovering whatever surveillance video they could get their hands on. That's how they discovered the footage of Joaquín riding his bike to school on June 29th. The video confirmed that he left his house just after 2:57 p.m., like his mom had said. But this was far from the only important evidence that investigators would find. On July 1st, police called Mariela and Martín down to the local station. When they arrived, they told them, "We have something that you need to see." They sat the parents down, and they showed them this image, which was taken from footage of another security camera right outside of Joaquín's high school. The image you're seeing is of Joaquín walking off school property right next to his best friend, Leandro. So clearly, Leandro had lied to Mariela when he spoke to her on the phone. He had seen Joaquín on the day of his disappearance. But Joaquín's parents were incredibly confused by this. Joaquín and Leandro had known each other since elementary school and had been best friends since the 3rd grade. The pair were inseparable and basically did everything together, from countless hangouts at each other's houses, to celebrating birthdays, to taking their first communions at church. They couldn't understand why Leandro was hiding the truth from them. This is exactly what police wanted to know as well, which is why shortly after this, Leandro was also brought down to the station. During questioning, Leandro admitted that he had seen Joaquín on June 29th and said that he had only lied because he didn't want to snitch on his friend. When police asked him what he meant by this, he said that Joaquín had run away from home. He said that he was tired of his parents' strict rules and that he didn't want to live with his family anymore. As soon as they heard this, Mariela and Martín were like, "No way." They told police that this didn't sound like their son at all. Joaquín was the opposite of a rebellious teenager. He was known for being quiet, reserved, and obedient. But more than that, he absolutely loved his family. When Leandro was pressed for more information, his story kept changing. He went back and forth on whether he actually knew where Joaquín was, as well as where he had supposedly told him he was going. There was something else that had caught the police's attention by this point as well. You see, that same surveillance system that had filmed the boys leaving school property had also captured Leandro returning alone. As he was heading back towards the building, he had momentarily dropped something, which turned out to be a cell phone. The thing was, it was well known that Leandro didn't have a cell phone. Once again, Leandro initially lied when he was asked about this. At first, he claimed the phone belonged to his dad, but when Mariela and Martín saw the device, they immediately recognized it as Joaquín's. Except the case had now been painted a different color. When he was confronted about this new lie, Leandro went back to that story about Joaquín running away from home. He said Joaquín had given him his cell phone so that his parents wouldn't be able to track him. Understandably, this all sounded incredibly fishy. Something was going on here, but Leandro wouldn't give police anything else other than a general direction that he said Joaquín had headed after leaving school. Well, as it happened, they were about to find out why Leandro was being so uncooperative, and it was worse than anyone had ever imagined. On July 2nd, so 3 days after Joaquín Sperani went missing, a team of volunteers decided to cover a couple of areas close to the school that hadn't been thoroughly searched yet. One of these spots was an abandoned property that was located just 100 yards away from the building at one of the other ends of the block. It's not clear why it took so long for a place like this to be searched, but what we do know was what was waiting inside once the group finally went in. It was actually one of Joaquín's cousins who was the first to go through the door of the decrepit house, and almost immediately after they did, they started screaming. Only a short distance beyond the entrance was Joaquín. He was lying face down on the floor, and he was dead. It was clear that he had been the victim of a savage attack. Close to his body was a length of metal pipe and a chunk of concrete brick, both of which had bloodstains on them. An autopsy would later reveal that Joaquín had died from severe head trauma and that he had suffered between 10 to 18 blows to his face, head, and upper body. As you might imagine, when Joaquín's parents were informed about his death, they completely broke down and just went to pieces. They were actually back at the police station when all of this happened, but they weren't alone. Leandro was also there and had been answering, or should I say, not answering, more questions. But as soon as he heard Mariella and Martine yelling out in despair, he immediately launched into a chilling confession. Leandro admitted that on the afternoon of June 29th, he and Joaquín had gone over to the abandoned house because they planned on skipping class together. However, he said that while they were hanging out, they had gotten into an argument. Things got heated, he grabbed the metal pipe and the piece of concrete, and he ended up hitting Joaquín in the head. He claimed that he never intended on killing him, though. However, even this turned out to be a lie. You see, as police switched their focus from Joaquín's movements and began looking into what Leandro had been doing on the day of the killing, the whole thing became a whole lot more disturbing. Though this was never released to the public, police were apparently able to get their hands on even more surveillance footage, this time showing the courtyard of the abandoned house. That footage not only showed Joaquín and Leandro arriving together that afternoon, and then Leandro leaving alone, it also revealed that Leandro had been there earlier in the day by himself. In fact, he had spent about 40 minutes there that morning, and had also brought the metal pipe that was later found at the scene. Based on this, investigators concluded that the crime was almost certainly premeditated. They theorized that Leandro had met Joaquín outside of the school as soon as he got there that day, and then suggested that they ditch class and have a little skip day. Trusting his friend, Joaquín had gone off with him, not knowing that he was walking into a trap. As I mentioned, Joaquín had sustained numerous serious injuries, but what was notably absent were defensive wounds. It seemed that Joaquín had been attacked from behind before he ever got a chance to protect himself. As awful as all of this already was, police soon uncovered other extremely unsettling details. They learned from other students at the school that Leandro had acted completely normal after running back to class. He didn't seem like he was upset or worried at all. The only thing out of the ordinary anyone had noticed was that he spent a bunch of time painting what had turned out to be Joaquín's phone case during class that afternoon. Now, you're probably wondering, what would cause a 14-year-old boy to plan and brutally murder his best friend? And well, unfortunately, that's not something police were ever really able to get a clear answer to. Leandro stuck to his story about the random argument, and no one else in the boys' lives really seemed to have any idea what was going on. That isn't to say that there weren't theories. A number of people, including Joaquín's parents, said that he was being bullied at school. Despite being a shy and kind kid, a lot of other students apparently picked on him, and he didn't have a ton of friends. Of course, Leandro was supposed to be different, but at least one teacher said that they had noticed issues there as well. The teacher said that several weeks earlier, Joaquín and Leandro had suddenly stopped sitting together in class and seemed to be distant from one another. As far as school officials went, it seems that they were completely out to lunch. Apparently, they contradicted themselves about the whole bullying thing, saying that there was no record of any problems. According to Joaquín's parents, though, they had previously complained to the school's administration, and when they did, they were told that what their son had been experiencing was, quote, just jokes that the kids made. Frustratingly, we'll likely never know exactly what Leandro's motive was, whether it was a rift in he and Joaquín's friendship, whether he became just another bully who tormented him, or whether he simply wanted to steal a cell phone. There's one other, even darker possibility, though, and it has to do with something police reportedly found when they searched Leandro's home. Hidden inside of a teddy bear in his room was a piece of paper. Written on it was Joaquín's name, another child's name, and the phrase, "Mom will soon forget about this." So this could be taken as a sign that Joaquín was just Leandro's first victim. Maybe he was planning to do this again. After the whole awful truth was uncovered, Leandro was arrested, but there was still a pretty major problem. The minimum age of criminal responsibility in Argentina is 16, meaning that Leandro couldn't be held legally culpable for his actions. Joaquín's parents and family tried their best to fight this, arguing that with the level of premeditation here, that surely Leandro knew what he was doing and was a danger to society. They held marches, vigils, and demonstrations demanding justice. But in the end, the justice system decided that there was just no way they could hold him legally accountable. After spending a few months under psychiatric evaluation, Leandro was released into his parents' custody. As part of his release, he was required to continue undergoing long-term treatment, but that was basically it. He and his parents changed their names and moved to a different city. Stunned and heartbroken by this decision, Joaquín's parents took the only path left to them and filed a lawsuit against Leandro's family, the school, and the provincial government. In February of 2025, Mariela and Martín won the case. While Leandro's parents ended up being excluded from the lawsuit, it was ruled that the boys were both supposed to be in the school's care and that officials there had been negligent. The Sperani family were awarded 600 million Argentine pesos, worth the equivalent of about $560,000 US. While this is certainly something, as Mariela pointed out, it still hardly feels like justice. In an interview, she told reporters, quote, "Joaquín's rights never existed. Leandro killed and walked away as if nothing had happened." Speaking of walking, this photo of the surveillance footage of Joaquín and Leandro has given me chills ever since I learned the context behind it. Seeing that big smile on Joaquín's face and knowing he was with someone he thought was his best friend is absolutely heartbreaking. It's an image I don't know that I'll ever be able to get out of my head. On an afternoon in August of 2015, a young man and woman arrived at Alabama's Cheaha State Park. They were there to walk a section of the Pinhoti Trail, a more than 300-mile-long route that runs through the southern Appalachian Mountains. The day was about more than just a simple hike, though. It was also supposed to be the start of a new chapter for the both of them. There were some big life changes coming up, and this was meant to be a sort of symbolic new leaf. The afternoon would be partially documented in a series of photos, ones that at first glance look totally normal. But once you know the context behind them, they become much darker. Particularly this one. That's because this is where that series of images would come to an abrupt and tragic end. The summer of 2015 was an exciting time for 18-year-old Jolee Callan. She just graduated from high school, and she was getting ready for college in a few short weeks. It was that in-between period where something big is on the horizon but hasn't quite started yet, where everything in life just feels full of pure potential. Jolee was from Vincent, Alabama, a tiny town about 30 miles outside of Birmingham. She came from a loving family, and from the sounds of it, had a good and happy childhood. Despite her small stature of just 4 feet 10 inches, Jolee was known for her big and very sweet personality. She liked to express herself, whether it was through her vibrant and seemingly ever-changing hairstyles, or the many theater productions she took part in throughout school. Jolee was a popular and social teen with a lot of friends, and one of those who'd been especially taken with her was a guy named Lauren Bunner. Lauren was 2 years older than Jolee, and while it's not exactly clear how the pair of them first met, what we do know is that they soon developed feelings for one another. Lauren fell particularly hard, and for a while they were completely inseparable. Though the relationship lasted for about a year, unfortunately the honeymoon phase quickly ended. You see, for as much as Lauren claimed to love Jolee, his actual behaviors were something closer to a mixture of obsession and immaturity. Lauren was jealous and controlling, and he didn't like the idea of Jolee being around anyone else but him. And his idea of a good time was pretty much just him and his friends sitting around and playing video games while Jolee watched. Understandably, she quickly got tired of this, but every time Jolee would try to break things off, Lauren would pull what is perhaps the oldest move in the toxic young love playbook. Anytime he felt like she might actually end the relationship, he threatened to end his life. By that summer, though, Jolee had finally gotten up the courage to make a clean break. She sat Lauren down, told him things between them had to end, and that this was for the best. Since she was going off to college anyway, it would be a chance for them to both have a fresh start. Of course, Lauren did not take this well, and he tried to get Jolee back with the usual manipulation tactics. You know, the brooding and cryptic posts on Instagram, the threats, the whole production. But this time, Jolee held firm in her decision. For the next little while, things sort of settled into a new normal. Jolee was enjoying the remainder of her summer and was also busy preparing everything she needed to get done before school started. She even met someone new and started seeing them as well. In late August, Lauren started reaching out to Jolee again, but this time he said that things were different. He claimed that he was done with all the emotional blackmail and that he had been doing a lot of soul searching. He was focusing on changing and being a better version of himself, and he didn't want them to be completely out of each other's lives. He asked if they could start hanging out again, stressing that from now on, he was committed to being just friends. Jolee was understandably skeptical, but wanting to be a kind person, she said yes. And based on posts to the pair's Instagram accounts, it seems that they did have a couple of outings over the next few days that were pretty normal, including a trip to a local bowling alley. This might partially explain why Jolee made what would turn out to be a fateful decision a couple of days later. On August 29th, Lauren asked if Jolee wanted to go on a hike through Cheaha State Park with him. He said that they could take her dog Kiba on a long walk, and that the two of them could enjoy the scenic views. It would be a chance to spend a last little bit of time together before she officially left for college. At first, Jolee didn't know how she felt about this. Sure, they had started hanging out again, but the last couple of times they had been with other friends. This would be just the two of them and her dog, basically out in the middle of nowhere. As she thought about it more, though, she eventually agreed. She figured this would help to finally tie up this loose end, and then afterwards she and Lauren would both be able to move on. Still, that night she texted one of her friends expressing her reservations, writing, quote, "If something happens to me, you'll know who I was with." The message was obviously meant to be a joke, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. The following day, so August 30th, Jolee and Lauren climbed into his car and headed out to Cheaha State Park. It was a beautiful summer day, the perfect weather for a long hike. Throughout the journey, Lauren took and posted several photos to his Instagram, showing them driving, walking, and Jolee and her dog taking in the scenery along the trail. This image, though, would stand out. It shows Jolee standing at the top of a rocky 40-foot cliff at a lookout point while taking a picture. Not only was this the last image posted that day, it was also the final photo that would be taken of Jolee Callan while she was still alive. At around 6 p.m. that same evening, police in the city of Oxford, about 20 miles outside of the state park, received a 911 call. It was from Lauren Bunner. He told dispatchers, quote, "I want to turn myself in for the murder of my ex-girlfriend, Jolee Callan, that happened just a little while ago on Cheaha Mountain." Lauren said that he was parked just off of Interstate 20 near exit 179 and told authorities exactly where to find him. When they arrived there, they found Lauren in possession of a .22 caliber handgun and noticed blood all over his steering wheel. He proceeded to give officers more chilling details, telling them where they should look for Jolee's body. A little while later, Jolee was found at the bottom of the same rocky cliff face where that final photo of her had been taken. She had been shot twice in the head, once at the back and once between the eyes. Sadly, there was nothing anyone could do. She was dead. A search of the mountain revealed more disturbing evidence. There was a large amount of blood at the top of the cliff right above where Jolee was found. Investigators concluded Lauren had attacked her from behind while she was standing and looking out. After shooting her once, he had turned her body over, shot her again, and then pushed her off the cliff. When he was initially taken into custody, Lauren essentially admitted to all of this. Despite what he had told Jolee, he told police that he was having trouble moving on with his life following their breakup. The whole trip to the mountain was a giant trap to try and make one last desperate attempt at getting back together. When that failed, he decided that Jolee had to die. Despite this confession, Lauren changed his tune by the time court proceedings started a few months later. He now said that actually he and Jolee had made a pact to end their lives together. It's just that after killing Jolee, he conveniently found that he couldn't go through with it himself. Of course, Jolee's family and friends pushed back. They pointed out that she was looking forward to starting the next chapter of her life and showed zero signs of depression. Also, if what Lauren said was true, why shoot her twice and in such a brutal and seemingly personal way? It seemed like even Lauren and his attorneys realized that this made absolutely no sense, so they quickly pivoted to another line of argumentation. They said that Lauren had Asperger's syndrome, and because of his autism diagnosis, he should be granted youth offender status. This meant that even if he were convicted of a crime, the maximum time he could serve in prison would be 3 years. Unbelievably, this worked, and the judge ruled in Lauren's favor. This is especially egregious when you know that behind the scenes, Lauren was perfectly aware of what he had done. He reportedly bragged to cellmates about the crime, telling them that he wasn't sorry, and quite literally dropping the line, "If I couldn't have her, no one could." Fortunately, though, the killer's victory was short-lived. Following a massive public backlash, his youth offender status was revoked. In July of 2017, nearly 2 years after the killing, Lauren pleaded guilty to Jolene's murder and was sentenced to 52 years in prison. Even so, he will reportedly be eligible for parole after 15 years. That means he could be released as early as 2032. Jolee Callan was a young woman who had so much going for her, but everything was tragically taken from her in an act of incredible evil, selfishness, and short-sightedness. We can never know what was going through her head in those final moments as she stood looking out across that mountaintop. But one thing's for sure. This should have been the beginning of her life, not the end.
Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.